Coffee used to be the manliest drink on the planet. Detectives drank it black at 3 a.m. The dad who was up before everyone else drank it first thing in the morning. Soldiers carried it into battle. It was the thing that you reached for when everything else was falling apart. That identity turned into something very specific over the next century. Black coffee is the drink of serious, no-nonsense people. There's a whole documented cultural trope around it. The idea that taking your coffee black signaled something about your character. Didn't need it to soften, you could handle things as they were. Add cream and sugar and you were, in some unspoken way, admitting weakness. Now walk into a Starbucks, point at a random person's drink, and try to figure out what's actually in it. There's a good chance you'll see something that looks like a dessert. It's cold, layered, pink or brown, occasionally both, topped with foam, drizzled with something caramel colored, served in a cup that's mostly ice. And somewhere buried under all of that, maybe, is coffee. Now, look around the room. Look at what everyone else is holding. Almost nobody in that Starbucks has a cup of coffee. They have a cup of something that costs $10 and has a name that sounds like a dessert at a restaurant you'd go to for a birthday. People are ordering these things at 7 a.m., before work, as their morning ritual. The thing that's supposed to wake them up and get them out of the door is, in a lot of cases, nutritionally closer to a milkshake than anything that came out of a coffee pot. And I want to be clear, this isn't a rant about people's orders. Order whatever you want. But something genuinely strange happened to coffee over the last 20 years. Coffee, one of the oldest, simplest, most functional drinks in human history, got pussified. And the story of how that happened is a lot more interesting than it looks from the counter. It all started shifting in the early 2000s, when a new kind of coffee culture emerged. It kept the masculine seriousness, but repackaged it as sophistication. Now, the serious coffee drinker wasn't just a traditional tough guy. He knew the altitude of the farm his beans came from. He had opinions about pour-over technique. He took it black not because he was stoic, but because he understood that a good bean didn't need anything added to it. The culture was different, but the core signal was the same. Real coffee drinkers don't mess around with sweetness. Then, in 2003, Starbucks launched the pumpkin spice latte. Yes, that pumpkin spice latte. It didn't explode immediately. It grew slowly. Then, all at once, by the early 2010s, it had become the most culturally loaded drink in America. And what it was loaded with was mockery. It got coded almost instantly as the most basic girl drink. Internet culture built entire archetypes around the woman carrying a pumpkin spice latte in one hand while wearing Ugg boots and yoga pants. The contempt was loud and specific, and almost entirely aimed at the women ordering it. But something completely different happened. The pumpkin spice latte kept selling, and then it kept selling more. Starbucks was generating over $100 million a year from it by 2015. The mockery didn't slow it down. If anything, having a cultural identity, even a mocked one, made it more magnetic. It became a statement drink for the people who liked it precisely because other people had strong opinions about it. What that moment really was, looking back, was the old coffee identity losing its grip on the public for the first time. The real men drink it black posture got exposed as exactly that, a posture. And once that cracked, the whole market opened up. Fast forward 10 years to 2024, and only 18% of Americans said they prefer their coffee black. That number was more than double just 2 years earlier in 2022. Whatever held the old identity together dissolved extremely fast, and what rushed in to replace it was something the industry had never seen before. A generation that didn't think of coffee as coffee at all. They thought of it as a base, a starting point for something that was ultimately going to be cold, sweet, and worth photographing. The whole reason behind this structural and cultural phenomenon will probably not surprise you at all. See if you can figure it out by yourself by looking at these numbers. A pump of vanilla syrup cost Starbucks a few cents to dispense. They charged customers 80 cents per modifier. Sounds trivial, except those modifiers, the syrups, the cold foams, the caramel drizzles, generated $1 billion a year in revenue for Starbucks. That number doubled between 2019 and 2022. And in their own filings, Starbucks described that revenue as high margin, meaning it's not just big, it's the most profitable part of the drink. Think about what that does to every product decision downstream. If your fastest growing, highest margin revenue line is the sweetness you add on top, you double down on that. You build a menu that triggers add-on orders. You design seasonal launches around what sells modifiers. You stop asking, does this taste like good coffee? And start asking, does this make someone want an extra pump of something? The product follows the margin, not the other way around, which is exactly why Starbucks went from cold drinks being 37% of their sales in 2013 to 75% by 2024. And no, that's not just people preferring iced drinks on a hot day. It's a company systematically engineering its menu toward the format that generates the most add-on revenue per cup. And it wasn't just Starbucks doing the math. The entire supply chain looked at the same numbers and drew the same conclusion. Nestle opened a $675 million coffee creamer factory in Arizona specifically to serve this new generation of coffee drinker. Then there's Dutch Bros, and Dutch Bros is the most honest version of where this whole thing actually ended up. They started in 1992 as a push cart in Grants Pass, Oregon. Two brothers, Dane and Travis Boersma, selling espresso drinks out of a double-head machine on a street corner. For years, they were a regional Pacific Northwest thing, the kind of drive-through coffee chain you only knew about if you lived there. Then they went national, and when they went national, Dutch Bros grew by being a sweet drink company. By 2024, 94% of all beverages they sold to Gen Z customers were cold drinks. Not cold brew as in coffee, no, cold drinks. Customized energy drinks, frozen blends, things that had somewhere between a little and no actual coffee in them. Except for drinks like the 911, which is basically a heart attack in a cup. Their proprietary energy drink line, Blue Rebel, now accounts for around 25% of total revenue. That's a quarter of the entire business coming from something that isn't coffee at all. And the market rewarded them spectacularly for it. Dutch Bros stock climbed 65% in 2024, beating most restaurant and retail peers. They posted 19 consecutive years of positive same-store sales growth. Meanwhile, Starbucks, which spent years carefully maintaining the identity of a coffee company while quietly becoming a sweet drink company, spent 2024 and 2025 in a visible crisis. 6 consecutive quarters of declining comparable sales, a new CEO cutting 30% of the menu, and an internal goal of getting a brewed coffee out in under 4 minutes because it had gotten so complicated to make anything that a simple cup of coffee had become the benchmark of operational success. The TikTok loop closed everything off. A photogenic drink generates content. So do new publishers that create videos that are viewed by millions about a secret 13-ingredient Starbucks order. Or rage bait orders with over 40 pumps of added sugar, caramel, whatever. In the end, content generates orders. Orders generate data showing what's trending. The chains use that data to design the next launch. The next launch is always more elaborate and more visually interesting than the last one, because that's what the engagement metrics reward. At some point, the product development pipeline stopped starting with what makes a great drink and started with what gets shared. Those are different questions with different answers, and for about a decade now, the industry has been answering the second one. Which brings us to the part of the story nobody really wants to talk about, because outside of the financial incentive, there's a third layer underneath all of that, and it goes even deeper. Now, before we get into this part, I have to address the common objection. This is not a segment about how sweet coffee drinks are bad and you should feel bad for ordering them. People have had sweetened coffee forever. Europeans have been dumping it in from the moment coffee arrived on the continent in the 1600s. The idea that the only legitimate way to drink coffee is black is, as we've established, largely a 20th century trope with military roots and a masculinity complex. None of that is what this is about. What this is about is something more specific, something most people don't know, and that gets completely lost when the conversation stays at the level of sugary drinks are bad. The point that doesn't come to light enough is that drinking sugar is physiologically different from eating it. Like, measurably different. And that difference matters a lot when we're talking about something people consume every single morning as a daily habit. When you eat sugar in solid food, there's chewing involved, there's fiber, usually. There's a slower trip through your digestive system that gives your body time to manage what's coming. When you drink the same amount of sugar in a cold coffee drink, none of that applies. It arrives fast, it gets absorbed fast, and a large portion of it, specifically the fructose, which makes up roughly half of all added sugar, goes almost entirely to your liver. Unlike glucose, fructose bypasses the normal regulatory mechanisms your body uses to manage how fast sugar gets processed. The liver can't slow it down the way it would with other sugars. When you flood it with fructose quickly and repeatedly, it starts converting the excess directly into fat. That fat accumulates in the liver itself. That's the direct biological pathway to fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and eventually to metabolic syndrome, the cluster of conditions that precedes type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes rates have already quadrupled in the last 30 years. By 2050, it is estimated 1 in 8 adults, roughly 853 million people, will have diabetes if we continue like this. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but people know soda is bad, and we're also tackling that problem. This is just the soda conversation again with a different cup. And that's exactly the problem, because these drinks don't register the way soda does. A Coke is a Coke. Everyone understands what it is. Nobody confuses it with healthy food. But cold brew coffee with brown sugar oat milk and vanilla sweet cream cold foam sounds like a coffee order. The word coffee is in there, and coffee, real black coffee, genuinely has well-documented health benefits. There's solid research on it reducing the risk of certain cancers, supporting liver health, slowing cognitive decline. Those benefits are real, but they don't transfer. The halo that sits over the word coffee doesn't extend to a drink that contains 4 pumps of syrup and 50 grams of added sugar and happens to have a shot of espresso somewhere at the bottom. The research on coffee's benefits is almost entirely built on studies of plain black coffee. The drink people are ordering at 7 a.m. thinking they're being reasonable is sometimes closer nutritionally to a dessert than to the thing they think they're drinking. That gap between what people think they're consuming and what they're actually consuming is where the real damage happens. So here's where we land. The market's split, and it's split cleanly into two things that almost have nothing in common except the name. On one side, you have specialty coffee, single origin beans, light roasts, minimal processing, nothing added. A market that's actually growing, projected to expand by over $57 billion through 2028. The people who went deeper into coffee as a craft went this direction. They're in independent shops, arguing about extraction ratios and water temperature, drinking something that would be recognizable to a Civil War soldier as the same basic substance he was grinding in the field. On the other side, you have everything we've been talking about. Cold, sweet, customizable, photographable, a category that has been massively growing in size and revenue across different companies. Both of those things are called coffee. They are counted in the same industry statistics. They're ordered through the same apps. They exist in the same cultural category, and they are almost completely different products made for almost completely different reasons, consumed by people with almost completely different relationships to the thing in the cup. The word coffee became a container large enough to hold both a carefully sourced single-origin pour-over and a frozen sugar delivery vehicle with a shot of espresso at the bottom. And the industry had every financial incentive to keep those two things in the same category because the halo from one gave over to the other. The old identity, black coffee, functional, no nonsense, the drink of soldiers and detectives and serious people, is still there somewhere. And we have to bring it back for men and women alike. But the real question is, how do you think we can do that?